Who would have thought that Sean Diddy Combs, the self-made billionaire mogul, the man who once stood untouchable at the peak of hip-hop royalty, would be sitting alone in a cold detention cell, facing the ruin of everything he ever built? With decades he walked red carpets like a king, hosted yacht parties dripping in wealth, and crafted a public image of unstoppable ambition. But behind the walls of his towering mansions and luxury suites, there was a secret world, one darker than anyone could have imagined. A world filled with fear, loyalty tests, hidden voice notes, and allegations so disturbing that even his closest allies began to turn away in disbelief. Today, the very empire that made him powerful is cracking under the weight of truth, because, while he might have dodged a life sentence, his freedom, his reputation, and his billion-dollar brand are crumbling before his eyes. This is the chilling fall of a man who believed he could buy silence forever, only to discover that money can't bury every secret. But how did a global icon end up here? And what horrifying revelations are still to come? Long before cell doors clanged shut behind him, Sean Diddy Combs was the very definition of success. Born in Harlem, he clawed his way out of poverty with ruthless determination. By the time he turned 30, he wasn't just a producer or rapper, he was a cultural force. Bad Boy Records exploded in the 90s, launching the careers of Notorious B.I.G. Mays, Faith Evans, and so many others. His name became synonymous with luxury, shiny suits, champagne-soaked parties, million-dollar music videos, and statements like "I won't stop because I can't stop," echoing across hip-hop. His wealth multiplied beyond music fashion lines, vodka brands, television shows, real estate, and even stakes in billion-dollar tech companies. Forbes listed him as one of the wealthiest figures in music for years. To the world, he was unstoppable, magnetic, and admired. But as his empire grew, so did the whispers. Employees who quit suddenly, partners who vanished quietly, artists who refused to speak on him. These murmurs were drowned out by flashing cameras and headlines celebrating his brilliance. Because if there's one thing Diddy mastered, was the art of protecting his image, until cracks began to show. And what caused those cracks to widen into the chaos we see today? That's where his secret world begins to reveal itself. Behind those massive iron gates and marble foyers lay a world few outsiders ever saw. Former staff now describe Diddy's mansions as silent kingdoms ruled by fear and whispered commands. One former estate manager spoke of the endless NDAs forced upon anyone who entered his properties. Assistants, cleaners, chefs, drivers, everyone was warned, what you see here, stays here. But secrets have a way of clawing out. Employees claimed that these weren't just homes. They were playgrounds for his most unfiltered desires. Private rooms with blackout curtains and walls lined with soundproofing foam. Whole wings off limits to anyone but Diddy and his inner circle. Multiple staffers said they had to prepare these areas at odd hours, stocking them with baby oil, red lights, and drugs of every kind, all while guests arrived and left like shadows in the night. One assistant said, "Every morning felt like cleaning up after an apocalypse. Oils on the floor, wrappers everywhere, broken glass, and people we didn't even recognize sleeping on the couches." But as shocking as the morning aftermath was, it was the darkness of what happened during those nights that left staff traumatized. Some quit after just days on the job, unable to process what they had seen, or been forced to clean up. And the deeper you go into these rooms of secrets, the clearer it becomes. Diddy's empire was never just built on music and business. It thrived on power, fear, and total control. But if you think this was the worst of it, wait until you hear what came next. For years, Diddy's employees lived under an unspoken rule. Loyalty wasn't an expectation, it was a demand. Former assistants now reveal the psychological games he played to ensure unwavering submission. One chilling story came from an assistant who had only been working for Diddy for 3 weeks. During a yacht event in Miami, Diddy took off his diamond ring, held it out in front of the group, and without warning, hurled it into the ocean. Silence fell. Then he turned slowly and pointed to his assistant, saying simply, "Go get it." The young man, fully dressed in an expensive tailored suit, jumped into the dark Atlantic waters. Salt burned his eyes as he dove repeatedly, desperate to grab the shimmering metal from the ocean floor. When he finally emerged, drenched and shaking, holding the ring high above his head, guests cheered. Diddy merely nodded and turned away. Another former staffer spoke about his first week on the job. Late at night, he received a text from Diddy, "Come to my room now." Heart pounding, he rushed upstairs, only to find Diddy half asleep in bed with a woman beside him. Diddy pointed lazily under the bed and said, "Grab the remote for me." That was it. A test. Just to see if he would obey. Those who passed remained in his inner circle. Those who failed were fired or worse, publicly humiliated, blacklisted from industry jobs by his powerful network. Each loyalty test wasn't just about obedience. It was about breaking a person's will so they would never question his actions or speak about what they saw. And while these mind games were dark, they were nothing compared to what staff witnessed during his infamous parties. Parties that would leave psychological scars on everyone involved. These weren't parties in the way most imagine, with laughter. drinks, and music fading into the early morning. Diddy's nights carried a darkness that seeped into every person who witnessed them. Former assistants now speak of his wild king nights. Code for drug-fueled gatherings that blurred the line between reality and depravity. Staff were ordered to prepare bags of baby oil, industrial-sized bottles of lubricant, red lights to create his preferred ambience, and a steady flow of classless substances. One former house manager recalled walking into a room at 6 a.m. after guests had left. The carpet was soaked with oil, couch cushions ripped open, shattered glass crunching beneath his shoes. The smell of stale smoke mixed with something far more vile hung heavy in the air. He wore gloves to clean it up, he says, but the feeling of contamination never left him. Another staffer describes seeing young women barely conscious, slumped against walls or curled into corners. A woman with an IV drip would often visit the next day to revive those who had partied. For 24 hours straight without sleep or food, one guest whispered to an assistant as she was led out trembling, "I've never done anything like that before." There were rumors that these nights were recorded. Some staff claimed they were instructed to scrub all evidence from his phones and laptops before law enforcement could ever lay eyes on it. These nights didn't just leave behind trashed rooms and traumatized guests. They left psychological scars on the employees who witnessed everything but had no choice except to stay silent. But as you'll soon discover, the silence wouldn't last forever, because in the shadows of these endless nights, some staff were preparing to speak out, even if it meant risking everything. For years, Sean Diddy Combs ruled unchallenged. His empire built on platinum records and luxury brands. But all it took was one voice to pierce the fortress he'd built. And that voice was Cassie's singer, Cassandra Bentuta. Known to the world as Cassie, had been by Diddy's side for more than a decade. Fans saw her as his muse, the quiet beauty who graced his parties and photo shoots. But behind those polished images was a reality darker than anyone imagined. In 2023, Cassie filed a lawsuit that shook the entertainment industry. She accused him of years of sexual and physical abuse, manipulation, and rape. According to her lawsuit, their relationship wasn't built on romance, but on coercion, with threats and violence ensuring her silence. The suit described how she was forced to engage in acts she never wanted, how he allegedly filmed these encounters, and how his control over her life was total, almost overnight. Diddy settled the lawsuit for a reported $20 million. Many saw it as an admission, even though his legal team insisted it was to avoid dragging their private lives into court. But the damage was already done. Cassie's words ignited a firestorm, and others began to come forward. Women and men who had remained silent for years found courage in her testimony. Her story revealed what many had only whispered in hushed conversations, that behind the brand deals and Grammy wins was a man driven by an insatiable desire for dominance and control. For Cassie, this wasn't about money. It was about breaking free from a prison built not of iron bars, but of fear, shame, and manipulation. And with her truth unleashed, Diddy's untouchable reign began to crack. Yet, this was only the start, because after Cassie spoke, the floodgates burst open, and what followed was a deluge of lawsuits and damning allegations that no amount of money could wash away. Cassie's voice cracked the dam, but what poured out next was a flood so fierce it threatened to drown everything Diddy had ever built. Her lawsuit inspired a chorus of others, more than 50 civil suits stacked against the once mogul, each one echoing with stories of fear, power, and control. Women came forward with harrowing accounts of sexual assault, drugging, and violence, while men stepped into the light with allegations of coercion and humiliation. Some described freak-off parties so dark they left guests trembling and broken. Others spoke of being forced into silence through threats or intimidation. And each lawsuit peeled away the glossy layers of Diddy's empire, exposing the festering secrets beneath. For years, his legal teams worked like tireless soldiers, crushing stories before they could breathe, paying off victims, and scrubbing headlines clean. But now, there were too many voices to silence. The settlements, once hidden behind closed doors, became public currency in a world enraged by celebrity impunity. Each court filing became a headline, each statement a viral soundbite, fueling a narrative that no PR team could bury. And while Diddy sits behind the walls of Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, awaiting a sentencing that could stretch for decades, these civil suits loom like vultures circling above. Because even if he walks free from prison, his empire may never recover from the millions he'll pay to keep these secrets buried. But money isn't his only problem now. The lawsuits revealed something far more damning. The music industry's dark pact of silence, loyalty, and fear. A culture that protected predators in exchange for fame and fortune. Behind every fortune is a crime, they say, and behind Diddy's billion-dollar empire lay shadows few dared to name. His rise wasn't just built on music, deals, and branding brilliance. It was built on a silent code of fear. Former staff recall the iron grip he held on his inner circle. Assistants were forbidden to speak unless spoken to. House managers were cycled out like disposable gloves, over 20 of them fired or forced out in just 2 years. Some couldn't handle the mental games, others fled before being broken completely. For new hires, the initiation was simple but brutal: silence. For 30 days, Phil Pines, his executive assistant, wasn't spoken to once by the mogul he served. It was psychological warfare, designed to teach loyalty through humiliation. And if fear didn't keep you obedient, money did. Diddy paid well, obscenely well, but every paycheck carried a silent message. Your life is good because of me. Question me, and I can take it all away. This fear-based loyalty created a fortress around him, where no wrongdoing escaped and no boundaries existed. For staff, it wasn't just a job, it was a trap. Even when he screamed through glasses at walls, or forced them to fish out jewelry he tossed into oceans as a twisted loyalty test, they obeyed. Because in Diddy's world, there were only two choices: submit or disappear. But what staff didn't realize was that this fortress of fear would eventually become his prison. Diddy's power didn't come only from money or fame. It came from mastering the art of psychological control. Former assistants have revealed that every day felt like walking on shattered glass, never knowing which version of him they'd face. One minute, he'd be sweet, offering designer gifts or sudden praise. The next, he'd explode with insults, demands, or eerie silence. Ethan, a trusted assistant, still carries a scar on his forehead from when Diddy smashed a glass against a wall in rage, shards slicing his skin as punishment for a minor mistake. Yet he stayed. Why? Because leaving meant losing everything. But the most disturbing mind games weren't violent outbursts, they were twisted loyalty tests. Staff describe how he'd remove his diamond ring, toss it into the Atlantic Ocean during a yacht party, and order assistants to dive in and retrieve it in full tuxedos, under moonlit waves, while guests watched in silent fear. And they did it, every time. Then there were nights when Diddy called staff after midnight just to fetch a TV remote lying under his bed while he entertained guests, or when he'd force them to buy humiliating lists of supplies for his infamous Wild King nights: 7 bottles of baby oil, 7 bottles of lubricant, iced lattes, and anything else he demanded within hours. No matter the time or location, these weren't tasks, they were deliberate acts to shatter pride and remind them of their place. To Diddy, loyalty wasn't proven through dedication. It was proven through submission. But no matter how many times staff obeyed, it was never enough. Because once you passed one test, another would come, darker and more degrading than the last. And soon the cost of these mind games wouldn't just be psychological, it would lead to legal war. Behind Diddy's mansion gates, far from paparazzi lenses, lay a world that even his closest allies called the darkness. These were the infamous Wild King nights, code for drug-fueled parties that blurred lines between reality, pleasure, and horror. Former assistants revealed how days before each event, staff would receive cryptic messages from his chief of staff. They'd be told to prepare black trash bags, industrial stain removers, and an endless supply of baby oil and lubricants. Red lights were set up to bathe entire rooms in an eerie glow, a signature ambience Diddy craved. One assistant, Phil Pines, described feeling sick the first time he was asked to gather the supplies. It wasn't just humiliating. It felt like I was arranging something unholy, he confessed in an interview. Sometimes these gatherings lasted hours, other times, days. Guests were offered illicit substances to keep them awake as they rotated through rooms set up like secret chambers in a twisted castle. When the parties ended, the cleanup began. Staff would enter suites that smelled of sweat, smoke, and despair, wiping oil off floors, scraping white powder residue from glass tables, and disposing of used items with gloves and masks. They weren't just housekeepers, they were crime scene cleaners for events that, according to rumors, left some guests mentally broken. But the darkest part wasn't what happened during the nights. It was what followed. One assistant recalls being instructed to escort a shaking young woman home. She whispered, "I've never done anything like that before," as she shivered, coming down from the drugs. Another guest needed an IV drip the next morning just to stabilize her body. And yet, while victims left scarred, Diddy walked away untouched, his power shielding him from exposure. Until the lawsuits arrived, one after another, each peeling back the veil on Wild King nights, and what truly went on in the shadows. But even these secret orgies weren't his final act of power. Because Diddy's next move showed how untouchable he believed he was. There are loyalty tests, and then there is what Diddy demanded from his staff. One chilling night in Miami became the prime example of how his twisted sense of power went far beyond harmless pranks. Former assistant Phil Pines recalled being called to set up an after-party. The guests were already gone from reality, drifting under the effects of mushrooms and cocktails poured for hours under the blazing sun. The staff worked quietly, setting red lights, arranging drinks, and making sure everything was perfect before Diddy entered the room like a king returning to his throne. But then Pines was handed a condom. Diddy pushed him towards a woman lying on a couch, barely conscious, and demanded he prove his loyalty. Pines froze, blood draining from his face. He had seen wild requests before, but this wasn't one of them. This was the unthinkable. He said he felt cold, like ice replaced his veins. The woman murmured consent, but Pines felt manipulated. used like an object in Diddy's sick power game. As soon as Diddy drifted away into another suite, Pines pulled up his pants and left, disgusted by what he had been forced to do. Later, he described the moment as pure psychological torture. He wasn't an assistant anymore, he was a pawn, forced to play out the billionaire's private fantasies of domination and humiliation. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about loyalty. It was about proving to himself that he controlled every person under his empire. What's more horrifying is that this wasn't an isolated moment. Multiple staffers testified about similar experiences, humiliating tasks, sexual coercion, psychological torment, all under the banner of loyalty tests. But as the court cases piled up and assistants broke their silence, it became clear that these weren't loyalty tests. They were criminal acts that exposed the deepest rot in Diddy's empire. And while the world now knows about Wild King nights and coerced loyalty, even darker revelations were waiting to emerge, truths hidden within his personal vaults and voice notes, secrets that not even his closest confidants had imagined. Behind Diddy's untouchable facade lay vaults of secrets, hundreds of hours of recordings, private notes, and voice messages that painted a horrifying portrait of his real life away from the cameras. But it wasn't until investigators finally got their hands on those voice notes that his empire's foundation truly began to shake. In one of the leaked notes, Diddy could be heard slurring commands to staff after an orgy-filled Wild King night, ordering them to clean up immediately so no guest would ever see the aftermath. "Can y'all come straighten it up over here? It's not looking luxurious," he said, his voice thick with drugs and arrogance, as R&B music played in the background. Another note revealed him bragging about the young women he'd flown in for his private nights, casually mentioning their ages and how they'll do whatever I tell them. For prosecutors and victims, this wasn't just an egoistic boast. It was evidence of systematic exploitation by a man who believed money made him invincible. But perhaps the most haunting voice note was the one where he warned his staff, "I'm not about to be transparent with y'all. There's some dark places y'all don't want to go. Stay where you're at." It was a cryptic threat, a reminder to never question him, to keep their heads down and mouths shut, or face the consequences. These recordings ripped apart his public image as a flashy mogul with a work hard, party harder brand. They exposed him as a man who not only orchestrated these depraved nights, but viewed every assistant, manager, and guest as disposable pawns in his kingdom of secrecy. And if voice notes alone weren't shocking enough, what investigators later found in its personal devices and cloud backups would push the entire scandal into global headlines. When federal agents raided Diddy's Miami and Los Angeles mansions, they expected to find drugs, maybe unregistered weapons, and traces of his infamous parties. But what they uncovered instead was a digital vault so extensive, so damning, that even his own defense team was blindsided. Stored across encrypted drives, cloud backups, and hidden folders were thousands of photos, videos, and recordings documenting years of depravity. Footage showed barely conscious guests sprawled across his luxury suites, women crying in bathrooms after being forced into humiliating acts, and his staff meticulously scrubbing floors covered in baby oil, lubricants, and drug residue before sunrise. Even more disturbing were the time-stamped videos that lined perfectly with the stories victims had shared under oath. Videos of him orchestrating Wild King nights, directing staff to bring out the young ones, and recordings of his volatile outbursts when anyone questioned his demands. In some clips, his own voice revealed strategies to erase evidence, including instructions to destroy security footage and wipe guest devices before they left. For prosecutors, this wasn't just a goldmine, it was the final nail in his legal coffin. No matter how many lawyers he hired, these digital receipts spoke louder than any denial. They proved a consistent pattern of abuse, coercion, and intimidation, validating dozens of lawsuits lined up against him. Investigators later revealed that some staff risked their livelihoods to leak encrypted copies of these files before Diddy could destroy them. An act of silent rebellion from employees who had witnessed too much darkness for too long, but as the public processed the horrifying realities trapped within his digital vault, they began to ask a new question. How had he managed to keep this hidden for so many years? The truth about the protection network behind his empire was about to come crashing down in a way even his enemies couldn't have predicted. For years, people wondered how Sean Diddy Combs managed to live so publicly, yet keep his darkest secrets buried deep. The answer lies in the protection network. He built a fortress of lawyers, fixers, enforcers, and insiders who ensured nothing reached the light of day. Former employees revealed that anyone who dared speak up faced instant termination, financial ruin, or threats cloaked in polite legal language. His legal team included some of the most expensive attorneys in America, always ready to file injunctions, threaten defamation suits, and bury evidence under piles of paperwork until victims simply gave up. Beyond lawyers were his fixers, former federal agents and private security operatives hired to intimidate journalists, stalk former partners, and monitor staff communications. They tracked leaks before they became stories, paying off witnesses with hush money or creating smear campaigns to destroy their credibility. Some staff even claimed they were forced to sign fresh NDAs every few months, with updated clauses forbidding them from speaking about anything seen, heard, or implied within Diddy's properties. And then came the enforcers, men loyal to him for years, some with criminal histories, who operated quietly in the shadows. Rumors suggest these individuals ensured that no woman or employee went to the press without first facing a terrifying warning about what they stood to lose, or what could happen to them and their families. It was this iron grip on power that allowed Diddy to carry out his wild king nights, loyalty tests, and humiliating staff rituals without fear of exposure. His public image remained squeaky clean, an innovator, entrepreneur, music mogul, billionaire philanthropist. But behind the brand was a man who treated fear and manipulation as essential business tools. Yet even the strongest protection networks crumble when insiders decide enough is enough. As investigators pieced together testimonies from brave former employees, the empire he built began to fracture. Lawsuits multiplied, secrets spilled, and the legend of his untouchable power started to fade. But if you think this was the full extent of his darkness, you're wrong. Because what came next revealed how Diddy used even his own children and closest relationships as pawns to maintain absolute dominance over everyone in his world. It's one thing to build a wall of lawyers and fixers around you, but it's something far darker to use your own children as shields in your empire of secrets. Insiders revealed that Diddy perfected this tactic over the years, painting himself publicly as a loving father while quietly leveraging his family to strengthen his untouchable image. Behind closed doors, staff said he would often involve his children in parties and events to make everything appear family-friendly when authorities or media questioned his gatherings. Former assistants recalled how teenage friends of his sons were invited to his mansions, only to witness nights turning into chaotic adult-only scenes. Some left feeling deeply uncomfortable. Others kept quiet out of fear and confusion. In public interviews, Diddy spoke of teaching his children the hustle, the grind, the legacy. But insiders said he was equally teaching them loyalty above all, training them to never speak about what happened inside those estates. One ex-staff member recalled overhearing Diddy warn his son after a heated argument, saying, "This family comes before everything. You know that, right? Everything." This strategy extended to his romantic relationships too. Multiple women reported how he would parade them alongside his children for press photos, crafting an image of a wholesome blended family. But away from cameras, the same women alleged they were coerced, manipulated, and treated as disposable. Once they stopped obeying his rules, in legal filings, it was revealed that some victims chose not to testify against Diddy because they feared the backlash from his children, people they'd spent years around, forming bonds that made their silence even more painful. One accuser said in her deposition, "They see him as a hero. I didn't want to destroy that for them, but I can't keep silent anymore." For decades, this fatherhood image worked like a suit of armor, making it difficult for the public to reconcile the doting dad they saw with the predator emerging in lawsuits and sworn testimonies. But as each brave voice came forward, that armor started to crack, revealing the man beneath. And if you think family was his only psychological weapon, the next part will shake you to the core. Because Diddy's mind games and loyalty tests reached terrifying new extremes that left even his closest employees fearing for their sanity and safety. If you thought using family as shields was dark, wait until you hear about the psychological games Diddy allegedly used to keep his inner circle trapped in loyalty and fear. Former staff, security, and even artists under his label described these experiences as traumatizing loyalty tests, designed to break down personal boundaries and rebuild them in his control. One former bodyguard claimed that on several occasions, Diddy ordered him to take the blame for situations that could have tarnished his name. From party altercations to substances found on his properties, he would say, "You work for me, you take this fall, you'll be rewarded for it," the guard recalled. But the rewards were temporary, hush money, a car, or a short-term promotion until the next loyalty test arrived. Each one more humiliating and risky. Artists under Bad Boy Records weren't spared either. Multiple rising rappers spoke about being suddenly cut off financially or locked out of studios as a test. One described it as psychological torture, saying, "He'd make you feel like you were nothing without him. Then, if you came crawling back, he knew he owned you forever." Even in his romantic relationships, insiders said he played similar games. A former girlfriend stated that he would shower her with gifts and praise one day, only to isolate and degrade her the next, watching how far she'd go to regain his approval. It was a tactic of dominance, calculated to ensure she'd never think about leaving or exposing his secrets. Perhaps most disturbing were the sexual loyalty tests detailed. In recent lawsuits, victims claimed he forced them to perform acts they were uncomfortable with, sometimes in front of others, threatening to ruin their careers if they refused. Legal filings note these incidents as part of his alleged pattern of coercive control and psychological abuse. One ex-staffer summed it up bluntly: "These weren't tests of loyalty. They were demonstrations of power. He wanted to remind you who owned your life." And just when you think you've heard it all, wait until you discover how Diddy's desperation to erase these truths turned into a hunt for anyone brave enough to expose him. As the loyalty tests grew darker, so did Diddy's desperation to keep his secrets buried. Behind closed doors, a complex system of silent payouts and non-disclosure agreements kept a lid on his controversies for decades. Former legal aides revealed that Diddy's team maintained a separate ledger for confidential settlements. According to one former attorney, these ranged from $20,000 hush payouts to multi-million-dollar settlements. Depending on how dangerous the accusation was to his empire, the system was cold and calculated. If you signed, you disappeared from the public narrative forever. One dancer recalled being offered 6 figures after threatening to report an incident at a private event. They told me straight up, take the money, sign, and disappear. If not, they'd make sure I never danced in the industry again, she said. For a young artist with no financial backup, the choice felt like survival. Cassie's lawsuit in 2023 broke this pattern when she refused to remain silent. Despite a $20 million settlement offer, her courage inspired dozens more to come forward. Though many of their claims revealed they had previously signed NDAs and feared the consequences of breaking them, but these payouts weren't just about sexual abuse or violence. Rumors suggest he silenced financial whistleblowers to staff who discovered embezzlement, tax fraud, or connections with shady business partners. Mysteriously resigned with large exit packages and ironclad gag orders, some insiders claimed. Diddy kept personal recordings of these negotiations, video and audio files stored in encrypted drives, allegedly used to intimidate those who threatened to leak information. Lawyers say these could become critical evidence in upcoming civil suits, revealing a long pattern of manipulation and cover-ups. These revelations paint a picture of a man who, despite his billions and fame, operated in constant paranoia, terrified that even a single voice could topple the empire he built on intimidation and secrecy. But if you think hush money was his only weapon, wait until you hear how Diddy allegedly used private investigators and underground networks to stalk, threaten, and hunt down potential whistleblowers. If hush money wasn't enough to keep people quiet, Diddy allegedly had another tool up his sleeve, a covert network of private investigators and enforcers working behind the scenes to track, threaten, and silence anyone who dared to speak out. Former staff claimed that in the early 2000s, after one major scandal threatened to explode in the media, Diddy hired an ex-law enforcement officer to build what they called his shadow army. This team wasn't just for basic security. According to multiple insiders, their job was intelligence gathering on enemies, rivals, journalists, and even his closest employees. One personal assistant described how her phone was confiscated and checked weekly. Another estate manager said she was stunned to learn that the team kept tabs on her calls, emails, and who she spent her evenings with, all under the guise of protecting Mr. Combs' interests. But the darkest claims come from women who say these investigators crossed the line into intimidation. One former backup dancer reported being followed for days after refusing to sign an NDA. Another woman said she was stalked outside her workplace and sent anonymous warnings about ruining powerful people's lives. And it didn't stop with women. When a music producer threatened to leak financial documents that exposed embezzlement within Bad Boy Records, sources allege he received late-night calls from blocked numbers and photos of his family sent to his phone as a chilling message to stay silent. Multiple insiders say that Diddy's shadow army also managed his blackmail archives, organizing compromising footage, photos, and recordings to use as leverage. A former IT technician claimed he saw folders labeled with celebrity names, each containing sensitive materials that could destroy reputations overnight. As shocking as these tactics sound, they reportedly created an atmosphere of fear so intense that even people who left Diddy's inner circle years ago still refuse to speak publicly, terrified of retaliation from a network that remains hidden but very much alive. But despite these extreme measures, there was one betrayal so deep that even Diddy's shadow army couldn't contain it. For years, Diddy's empire seemed untouchable, but insiders say the real cracks didn't come from his rivals or his victims. They came from his own family. In late 2024, just before his federal arrest, rumors began circulating that one of Diddy's cousins had secretly met with federal investigators. This cousin wasn't just a distant relative, he was part of Diddy's core management team, overseeing logistics for tours and coordinating his private travel for over a decade, according to leaked court documents. This family member turned informant after allegedly being cut out of a major business deal involving millions in international revenue. Feeling betrayed and financially ruined, he chose revenge. What did he give investigators? Reports claim he provided internal financial ledgers, secret offshore account details, and most shockingly, personal audio recordings of Diddy discussing hush money payoffs, threats against former employees, and private security briefings about silencing women with NDAs. One anonymous FBI official described this betrayal as the turning point of the entire investigation. Without the family member's insider access, authorities might never have built such an airtight case against the music mogul. But betrayal cuts both ways. Some sources say Diddy was tipped off by another relative before the informant's identity was fully revealed. According to leaked messages, he spent weeks after this revelation spiraling paranoid, lashing out at his team, and refusing to sleep at his main Beverly Hills mansion, out of fear that anyone could be wearing a wire. It's been said in his circle that no enemy hurt him more than blood. And while he managed to keep this betrayal from going public for months, its consequences are now unfolding in court, with prosecutors building their strongest charges directly on this relative's evidence. Yet despite family turning private, investigators following his every critic, and millions paid to make scandals vanish, there was one woman he could never silence, and her testimony would shake his empire to the core. If there was one voice Diddy couldn't buy, threaten, or erase, it was hers. Cassie Ventura, the woman who once called him her world, became the key to his undoing. Their decade-long relationship had always been rumored to be turbulent, but no one could have predicted the chilling details she revealed under oath. In late 2023, Cassie filed her civil lawsuit, accusing Diddy of physical abuse, rape, and years of coercion. Within 24 hours, he settled for a reported $20 million, an amount that silenced many onlookers who assumed it was over. But Cassie wasn't done. When federal investigators came knocking, she didn't hesitate. Her testimony wasn't just emotional, it was brutal. She described a life of forced compliance, threats to destroy her career, and endless surveillance by his security teams. Every day, she said, was a test of loyalty or a punishment for defiance. According to courtroom insiders, Cassie remained composed even when the defense tried to discredit her as a bitter ex seeking fame. She reportedly replied, "If I wanted fame, I would have spoken out years ago. I want peace." Prosecutors credited her with unlocking dozens of additional testimonies. Her courage inspired other women, and some men, to come forward with eerily similar stories. In one moment that silenced the courtroom, Cassie revealed that Diddy once forced her to record intimate videos with strangers under threat of violence, only to watch them later as a loyalty ritual. For his legal team, this was catastrophic. Cassie's words weren't just powerful, they were backed by photos, text messages, and videos recovered from seized devices. Her testimony directly supported two of the convictions he now faces. Outside the court, her influence was just as strong. Celebrities like Kesha, Evan Rachel Wood, and Christina Ricci publicly praised her bravery, with Ricci calling her a hero for every silent survivor trapped by powerful men. But while Cassie's stand finally cracked Diddy's fortress, she wasn't the only woman whose life he nearly shattered. Because next, we uncover the rising star who claims her career was destroyed before it ever began, simply because she said no. Before Cassie's revelations shook the world, there was another woman whose story never made headlines. She was a rising R&B singer with a powerhouse voice, discovered by one of Diddy's junior producers back in 2016. According to legal filings and sealed testimonies now surfacing, this artist, known only as M, in court documents was invited to Diddy's mansion under the promise of an exclusive record deal. But what she walked into was nothing like the professional meeting she imagined. Sources close to the investigation say that upon arrival, she was greeted not by label executives, but by Diddy himself, wearing a robe and surrounded by his inner circle. He allegedly told her bluntly that her career depended on her willingness to play the game. In her deposition, MK described the meeting as a horrifying trap. She claimed that when she refused his advances, the mood shifted instantly. Diddy reportedly laughed, ordered his security to escort her out, and by morning, her scheduled studio sessions across Los Angeles were mysteriously canceled. Calls went unanswered. Within days, every door in the industry slammed shut. She spent years trying to rebuild her name independently but could never overcome the silent blacklist. Her manager later testified that Diddy had told him privately, "She'll never work in my city again." For years, MK blamed herself. It wasn't until Cassie's lawsuit that she realized her experience was part of a broader pattern. Motivated by Cassie's courage, she filed her own civil case earlier this year, alleging career sabotage, coercion, and attempted assault. Insiders say she still struggles financially but continues to create music, hoping to release a full album once the legal storm clears. To her supporters, she's a symbol of quiet defiance, a reminder that Diddy's power wasn't just about money and intimidation. It was about the ability to erase a person's future in a single night. But M is no longer silent, and neither are dozens of others rising to demand justice. Because as this mountain of lawsuits continues to grow, one dark truth is becoming clearer than ever. This wasn't just about a powerful man's private vices. It was about a calculated empire built on control, fear, and silence. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs built an empire so powerful that his darkest secrets stayed hidden. But he didn't do it alone. Behind every locked door, private jet, and whispered payoff was an intricate network of enablers, lawyers, security chiefs, PR managers, and fixers, whose sole job was to keep his world sealed tight. Insiders now point to his former head of security, often called the Ghost, a man with no public records under his real name. According to federal investigators, the ghost handled everything from vetting party guests to disposing of incriminating footage before it ever reached the internet. One former Bad Boy Records assistant revealed to prosecutors how the ghost would routinely confiscate guests' phones at Diddy's infamous mansion parties and monitor their behavior all night. If anyone acted out of line or tried recording, they were swiftly escorted out, or worse, threatened with blacklisting across the industry. Then there were the lawyers, nicknamed internally as the Sharks. These weren't ordinary entertainment attorneys. They specialized in NDA enforcement, rapid hush money settlements, and what one whistleblower called evidence scrubbing. According to leaked court documents, Diddy paid upwards of $2 million a year just to maintain these crisis teams, ensuring that any scandal, sexual, violent, or financial, was resolved before headlines even got a whiff of it. One paralegal testified anonymously, saying, "We'd receive stacks of NDAs for women flown in for weekends. Some left with suitcases of cash, some left crying. Either way, they all signed before ever meeting him." It was this meticulous fortress of loyal enablers that allowed Diddy to operate unchecked for so long. Everyone had a role. The PR directors deflected questions, the stylists and assistants maintained the curated image, and the security team handled the dirtier work in private. But now, with over 50 civil cases surfacing and criminal convictions stacking up, many of these secret keepers are facing subpoenas themselves. Prosecutors believe that without their silent compliance, Diddy's abuses might have been exposed years earlier. And what's most shocking is that some of these insiders still work for other music moguls today, carrying the same playbook forward into the next generation of artists and executives. Because while Diddy may have fallen, the system that protected him is still alive, powerful, silent, and watching. While most celebrities rely on a core security team, Diddy's empire operated more like an organized network, with specialized fixers stationed in every city he frequented. In Miami, prosecutors uncovered that he maintained an entire villa, not just as a vacation mansion but as a controlled environment for parties. Former staff alleged that 2 local handlers were always present, men with ties to both nightlife promotion and private security firms. Their job? To screen guests at the door, confiscate devices, and ensure no unapproved footage ever escaped. One Miami promoter testified that everyone in the scene knew Diddy's villa parties were no-phone zones. Anyone refusing to hand over devices was simply turned away, no matter who they were. And if a guest caused problems inside, local off-duty cops on his payroll would discreetly handle removal before neighbors could call 911. In Los Angeles, the setup was even more advanced. Insiders say he kept an entire PR crisis team on monthly retainer, ready to kill stories within hours. These weren't interns posting Instagram captions. They were former entertainment journalists and newsroom editors who knew exactly which calls to make to bury and expose before it even published. One ex-team member revealed, he didn't just pay for silence, he paid for influence. He'd invite editors to private dinners, grant exclusive music drops, or donate to their charities, anything to keep the media loyal. Then there was New York, where his main penthouse became headquarters for his operations. Prosecutors say 2 top entertainment lawyers worked from offices in the same building, handling lawsuits, settlements, and hush money payments without ever needing to step outside. One anonymous paralegal called it a fortress of NDAs and non-stop wire transfers. It wasn't just about avoiding exposure, it was about controlling perception. If a scandal leaked in one city, the teams in other cities coordinated to ensure it didn't spread. This is why, for decades, his darkest secrets never made it to public light in full. But with the federal investigation breaking down these walls, city by city, prosecutors are now building what they call the complete map of his protection racket, tracing payments, communications, and threats across state lines. And what they're uncovering next could reveal the most disturbing part of Diddy's hidden life yet. If Diddy's mansion parties were underground kingdoms, then his private jets were the carriages ferrying guests to their secret destinations. But under an elaborate cloak of false identities and hidden manifests, federal investigators revealed that Diddy's Gulfstream and Bombardier jets rarely flew with accurate passenger lists. Instead, his team used aliases for high-profile guests, a practice common among A-list celebrities, but pushed to an extreme in his case. According to leaked airport records, women flown out for these events were often listed as assistants, makeup artists, or simply crew. One flight attendant, who later turned whistleblower, described it bluntly. Sometimes the manifests said 3 passengers, but there'd be 8 people on board. No IDs checked, just a nod from the security guy on the tarmac. On one particularly notorious flight from LA to Miami in 2021, insiders claim a famous model was flown under the name of Diddy's hairstylist. Another listed as a personal chef was, in reality, a singer he was courting for Bad Boy Records. Both were seen leaving the Miami villa 2 days later at dawn, avoiding paparazzi at the private hangar. Prosecutors allege these flights weren't just about luxury or convenience. they were about secrecy. Using aviation logs, they're building a timeline connecting specific guests to parties where allegations of coercion, drugging, and sexual assault later surfaced. Former pilot Ron Arper, who worked under Diddy's aviation contracts for 2 years, described the protocols as military-grade secrecy for purely private pleasure. We were told never to speak to passengers unless spoken to. No photos, no small talk, no eye contact. I've flown diplomats and royalty, but Diddy's trips were the most tightly controlled, and if a flight attendant or pilot ever breached these unspoken rules, according to internal aviation HR files, termination was instant with strict NDAs, forbidding them from speaking about anything they saw or heard. But as the investigation peels back each hidden passenger manifest, questions grow. Who exactly were these unnamed guests? What happened on these flights away from all public eyes? And what they uncover next could implicate powerful figures far beyond Diddy himself. If there's one thing Diddy invested in as heavily as music production, it was private security and surveillance. His mansions, studios, and penthouses were all fitted with state-of-the-art CCTV systems, reportedly upgraded every 2 years to the latest encrypted models. But here's the twist. Those cameras weren't installed to protect guests. According to prosecutors and multiple former staffers, their real purpose was to record everything and ensure that Diddy remained in control of any narrative that might ever emerge. When federal agents raided his Los Angeles and Miami properties earlier this year, they seized over 180 terabytes of security footage, spanning nearly a decade. That's enough to store thousands of hours of high-definition recordings from every angle of his residences. Investigators say some tapes reveal nothing but luxury parties, music studio sessions, and everyday mansion life. But buried among them are darker moments, alleged forced encounters between guests, individuals being led, visibly intoxicated, into private rooms, staff intervening in altercations, only to be dismissed instantly. One Homeland Security agent described the footage as equal parts music video and horror movie. Former staffers now speaking under immunity told prosecutors that Diddy often reviewed footage personally. One ex-security technician recalled he'd call down to the security room, asking to see tapes from specific dates. Sometimes he'd watch them with a smile. Other times he'd tell us to delete them immediately, but we kept backups. We always kept backups. Those backups, secretly saved by fearful employees, are what prosecutors believe will solidify many civil cases against him. Lawyers representing several women say the footage directly contradicts his public denials. Yet the tapes hold another layer of risk. Rumored appearances by other high-profile celebrities and executives at these parties, potentially exposing them to public and legal scrutiny. A former bodyguard put it chillingly. He filmed everything so he could control everyone. Nobody wanted those tapes to leak, because once they did, his empire wasn't the only one to fall. And now that investigators are decrypting and cataloging every second, the world may soon see the hidden reality of his so-called kingdom. Unfiltered and undeniable. But what prosecutors uncovered in his secret vault room next would shock even seasoned FBI agents. When federal agents raided Diddy's Los Angeles mansion, they expected hidden rooms. After all, it's a celebrity fortress. But what they found behind his studio library left them speechless. Using blueprint discrepancies and heat scans, agents discovered a concealed door embedded into the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf. It opened electronically via a small button hidden behind a row of old vinyl records. Behind it lay the vault room. At first glance it looked like any high-security walk-in safe. Thick metal walls, biometric locks, and silent alarms. But the contents were far from ordinary. Lining the walls were hundreds of black hard drives, all systematically labeled with dates and cryptic codes like Freakoff_11 or VIP_Power06. Investigators say these drives contained high-resolution footage of private parties and meetings, audio recordings of personal phone calls and business discussions, scanned documents, including NDAs, contracts, and alleged payoff ledgers, a separate cabinet storing unmarked prescription bottles, performance-enhancing substances, and vials of unknown liquids. One Homeland Security agent described the room as equal parts surveillance archive, intimidation, arsenal, and private pharmacy. But what shocked them most was a locked glass case in the corner. Inside were 5 burner phones, each wrapped in plastic evidence bags, with handwritten labels indicating the names of celebrities, executives, and political figures. Prosecutors believe these phones contained recorded conversations and compromising data, giving Diddy leverage over powerful people in entertainment, media, and beyond. A former manager, speaking anonymously, confirmed that vault room was his real empire. Music made him rich. The secrets in there made him untouchable. Authorities are still decrypting the drives and tracing the contents of those phones. Some files have already been turned over to legal teams, representing the 50 civil plaintiffs now suing him. Others, if released, could devastate reputations across industries. As one investigator stated, it wasn't just about protecting himself, it was about controlling everyone around him. But his agents continued to catalog the vault's contents. They discovered a set of hidden ledgers revealing years of underground payments and hush money transfers. When agents finally cracked open the metal drawers beneath Diddy's vault room hard drives, they uncovered something far darker than surveillance. Videos or burner phones. Inside lay 3 handwritten ledgers, their leather covers worn from years of use. But the entries were clear: precise dates, names, dollar amounts, and coded memos. Investigators described these as the Rosetta Stone of his secret financial empire. The ledgers detailed multi-million-dollar consulting fees wired offshore, 2 untraceable shell companies' cash payouts labeled with vague terms like favors, silence, and lifestyle maintenance, international transfers routed through Caribbean banks, 2 accounts registered under aliases. Most chilling were the entries marked with a single letter, K. Federal agents believe K refers to payouts linked to international arms dealers and underground security networks he used to protect his private gatherings and offshore dealings. One-line entry read simply, 25 milhões de dólares menos cá, menos Bahamas. Asset retrieval and safe house. Another showed, $500,000. LAV cleanup. According to a former bodyguard now cooperating with authorities, V cleanup referred to urgent damage control. Victims paid off to disappear quietly. Their NDAs enforced by intimidation or underworld contacts. But the ledger wasn't only about silencing people, it also documented massive payouts to political lobbyists and media executives. Transactions disguised as media expansion strategy or policy consulting, but with memos hinting at press suppression and legal favors. For years, rumors swirled about Diddy's global connections, including ties to Eastern European brokers and South American cartels, facilitating import-export schemes under the cover of his vodka and fashion businesses. These ledgers appear to confirm those whispers. 1. Homeland Security officials stated, "This isn't just celebrity excess or personal vice. These records show a highly structured criminal enterprise, using legitimate businesses as the perfect mask." Now, forensic accountants are tracing each transaction back to bank wires, offshore incorporations, and nominee directors scattered across Panama, Dubai, and Cyprus. As prosecutors prepare their next moves, insiders warn, this is just the surface. The people who took his money are panicking, because if these ledgers go public, entire power structures will collapse. But the most haunting part, some payments were made to anonymous offshore trust accounts marked with just one word, insurance. And what that insurance was used for would soon emerge in a way that would devastate not just Diddy's empire, but ripple through the entire music and entertainment industry. If the ledgers exposed the money trail, what agents discovered next revealed the terrifying extent of Diddy's grip over powerful people worldwide. Hidden in a sealed compartment behind his office's mirrored liquor cabinet were 2 encrypted SSD drives. At first, investigators thought they held routine financial data, but once decrypted by federal cybercrime units, the drives exposed what insiders are now calling the ultimate insurance policy. They contained thousands of video clips, voice notes, and confidential documents. Each file was meticulously labeled with names, dates, and keywords. The contents ranged from secret recordings of private conversations with politicians and business tycoons, videos from his parties showing A-list guests engaging in illicit activities, leaked internal memos from record labels and media houses revealing pay-for-play schemes and suppression of scandals. One federal official said, "It's like he had his own intelligence agency. Every business deal, every personal favor, he kept receipts, just in case." For years, rumors floated that Diddy maintained dirt folders on everyone who entered his orbit, whether they were record label CEOs, artists under Bad Boy Records, or high-ranking state officials. Some clips show guests under the influence, unaware they were being filmed, in situations that could destroy their careers overnight. Why keep such dangerous material? Prosecutors believe these files served as blackmail leverage, ensuring silence and loyalty. Former employees testified that if someone attempted to leave his inner circle or threaten him with exposure, they would receive a veiled message reminding them, "Remember, we have everything on file. Stay smart." One video allegedly shows a major streaming platform executive receiving a private cash handoff, with an audio note capturing them, promising to bury negative coverage on Diddy's upcoming scandals. Another folder labeled Family Insurance contained footage and documents on rival moguls, sealed court filings, and personal indiscretions. According to an insider, he believed loyalty wasn't real, only leverage was real. But the drives held more than blackmail material. Buried deep were folders containing incriminating evidence of his own activities, from offshore weapons deals to covert surveillance footage inside his own homes, videos of guests and employees in compromising private moments. Experts say the presence of self-incriminating files indicates he intended to use them as a last resort negotiation chip with authorities, in case his empire ever collapsed. Now, with these drives in federal custody, prosecutors have begun interviewing the people featured in the files. Some are cooperating, terrified of public exposure. Others have already lawyered up to prevent their darkest secrets from leaking. The Department of Justice is reportedly weighing whether to use the files to build a sprawling RICO case, indict additional high-profile figures for complicity, offer protection deals to those willing to testify against Diddy in court. When retired federal prosecutor summed it up, "This isn't just about him anymore, it's about everyone who enabled him, profited from him, or fell under his control." And as investigators prepare for the next phase, one question haunts the entire industry. If Diddy had this level of insurance, how many other powerful moguls keep similar blackmail files to protect their kingdoms? Now, with the files decrypted and 50-plus civil suits piling onto his criminal convictions, Sean Diddy Combs sits in Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, staring at a fate he never imagined. His sentencing date, tentatively set for October, looms like a final eclipse over his empire. Insiders say Diddy's once unbreakable confidence has cracked. Guards reported that his nightly pacing has turned into near-insomniac restlessness. He wakes up drenched in sweat, reportedly repeating the words, "They can't flip them, they can't flip them. Who is them?" According to court insiders, prosecutors have drawn up a list of over 30 close allies, employees, and business partners who could testify 2 years of behind-the-scenes criminal activity. Many of these insiders are also named in lawsuits, and the DOJ's strategy is simple yet ruthless: offer reduced sentences or immunity in exchange for testimony against Diddy, freeze assets to push them into cooperation. Leak portions of the blackmail files to pressure holdouts, a former federal prosecutor explained. They're using his own tactics against him: fear, leverage, exposure. It's poetic justice. His lawyers are scrambling to negotiate a sentencing deal under 20 years. But legal experts say each count he's convicted of carries up to 10 years in prison, and judges often stack sentences when the crimes involve extensive victimization and coercion. Meanwhile, the media frenzy outside the prison gates intensifies daily, with news drones capturing glimpses of his rare yard appearances, looking thinner, wearing an oversized gray hoodie, head down, avoiding cameras. But behind the walls, a darker reality. Bruised out, multiple inmates have allegedly attempted to approach Diddy for protection payments, offering him safety in exchange for thousands in commissary deposits routed to their families. Guards have reportedly intervened to prevent altercations, but insiders warn, once the sentencing is final and he's transferred to a long-term federal facility, there won't be daily protective supervision. He'll be just another high-profile inmate with a massive target on his back. For the first time in his life, money and influence may not buy safety. And with prosecutors ramping up their witness flips, each new betrayal could land another charge, another civil suit, and another decade in prison. Because in this final countdown, his empire isn't just falling apart, it's collapsing from the inside out. While Diddy counts down the days until his sentencing, another ticking time bomb ignited behind closed doors. Federal prosecutors recently conducted a sealed interview with his former personal bodyguard, who worked for him for nearly 7 years, and what he revealed could blow open Hollywood's darkest underbelly, according to court insiders. The bodyguard's testimony covered secret parties involving top music executives, athletes, and international billionaires, private jet trips arranged with models and dancers who, he claims, had their passports confiscated until returning to the U.S. cash drop-offs to undisclosed offshore accounts and shell companies to pay hush money to individuals threatening exposure, hidden phone recordings stored on Diddy's encrypted servers, documenting meetings with powerful politicians and industry moguls. One FBI agent described the interview as unlike anything we've heard in a trafficking investigation tied to entertainment. The bodyguard, whose identity is sealed under protective order, reportedly flipped after learning he was named as a co-defendant in 3 civil suits. Prosecutors offered limited immunity for cooperation, and what he gave them was explosive. He claims that Diddy ran a covert operation within his team. Selected staff were assigned to drug guests drinks to ensure compliance and prevent them from remembering the night, confiscate all phones and communication devices upon entry, record compromising footage for future blackmail or FBI is now cross-referencing his statements with dozens of encrypted files recently unlocked by forensic teams, potentially proving what many believed were just wild online conspiracy theories. And while Diddy sits locked up in Brooklyn, his lawyers are panicking. If prosecutors use this testimony to launch broader Hollywood indictments, Diddy could face RICO charges for organized criminal conspiracy, elevating his legal nightmare to an entirely new level. Because if these revelations are confirmed, his upcoming sentencing won't be the end of his story, it will be just the beginning of Hollywood's biggest reckoning yet. As the sentencing date looms closer, federal prosecutors are hunting for a woman whose testimony could seal Diddy's fate forever. They call her the missing witness, and insiders claim her disappearance isn't a coincidence. Here's what we know. She was a former dancer and private assistant who worked under Diddy's inner circle for nearly 4 years. According to court filings, she witnessed late-night meetings where massive cash exchanges were made for secret deals, guests being escorted out unconscious, only to wake up with no memory and missing personal belongings, a private storage vault in one of Diddy's properties containing tapes so sensitive, even his closest staff weren't allowed near it. But, right before she was due to testify, she vanished. Her lawyer told reporters she left town after receiving multiple threats, and after her family home was broken into twice in 1 week. Prosecutors believe she holds key information about financial transactions and illicit footage that could solidify federal conspiracy and trafficking charges. Sources close to the investigation claim FBI agents are now actively tracking her across state lines under witness protection protocols, suggesting she may be under government security to testify safely. Meanwhile, Diddy's defense team is scrambling behind the scenes. One insider stated, "If she appears in court, it's over." Her testimony fills the gaps in Cassie's case and aligns with what the bodyguard already revealed. Rumors even swirl that powerful figures outside Diddy's team want her silent, because if she takes the stand and names names, the fallout could spread far beyond one music mogul. Politicians, label executives, and international investors could find themselves dragged into the same web. For now, her exact location remains secret. But one thing is clear, the Department of Justice won't close this case without her. And when she finally speaks, the world might hear the most shocking truths yet about Hollywood's hidden empire. While the world focuses on his trial, federal financial investigators are digging into something far bigger: Diddy's hidden offshore fortune. According to leaked court documents reviewed by financial journalists, the mogul quietly built an empire worth over $400 million, tucked away in foreign accounts and shell companies. Here's what investigators uncovered: dozens of companies registered in Panama, Belize, and the British Virgin Islands, each structured under anonymous trustees to avoid direct tracing back to him. A complex web of dummy corporations funneling streaming royalties, brand endorsements, and investments into offshore funds, all to minimize U.S. tax exposure and shield assets from lawsuits. Private emails between Diddy's finance lawyers, suggesting they were fortifying his net worth offshore to protect against potential legal challenges as early as 2018. Years before Cassie's first lawsuit, one leaked document even details a $72 million private transfer to a Swiss investment trust, labeled as emergency asset reallocation. Analysts believe this was an attempt to move liquid cash out of U.S. jurisdiction before federal authorities could freeze his domestic accounts. But there's more. Prosecutors allege that some of these offshore entities were not just for tax avoidance. One Panamanian company funded private security and surveillance contractors involved in the parties under investigation. Another offshore holding paid retainers to law firms in multiple countries to enforce NDAs and defamation suits against potential whistleblowers. Former staff claimed Diddy bragged privately that the IRS couldn't touch him because his empire was protected like a fortress, a phrase repeated in leaked phone transcripts. Now, part of the court's evidence pool, financial experts say, if prosecutors prove these accounts were used to fund or conceal illegal activities, the federal government could seize hundreds of millions in offshore funds, potentially bankrupting him overnight. And while Diddy's team insists everything is legal and audited, international investigators from Switzerland, Belize, and Panama have now joined the probe, expanding it into a global financial crime investigation. For decades, Diddy lived as a music kingpin untouched by law. But these revelations prove the walls are closing in from every side, legal, financial, and public. For years, Diddy's empire thrived on an unbreakable code of silence. Every staff member, from drivers to private chefs, signed heavy and binding them to secrecy under threat of million-dollar lawsuits. But today, that wall of silence is crumbling faster than ever. According to internal court filings and investigative reports, over a dozen former employees have now breached their NDAs, offering testimony to federal agents in exchange for legal protection. One longtime personal assistant told prosecutors she feared for her safety if she ever spoke out, but felt compelled after seeing survivors publicly share their stories. Private security contractors who guarded his parties are now handing over internal surveillance logs, deleted phone videos, and incident reports that were meant to remain hidden forever. Lawyers for Diddy's team are scrambling to contain the fallout, filing urgent motions to block testimony based on NDA violations. But experts argue that NDAs don't protect criminal activity and will likely be struck down if used to silence witnesses. Former staff reveal a culture of fear. Some claim they were threatened with immediate deportation or blacklisted in the industry if they disobeyed orders. Others describe weekly hush payments routed through consulting contracts that paid them double their normal wage to ensure loyalty. But loyalty, it seems, has an expiration date. One former house manager told The Guardian, "When you've watched lives be destroyed in silence for years, no paycheck is worth that guilt anymore." Investigators say these new witnesses are critical to strengthening civil suits and potential federal RICO charges, as their insider knowledge connects missing puzzle pieces in financial and assault investigations. And with each NDA broken, Diddy's once untouchable empire grows weaker. The staff who once protected his secrets are now arming prosecutors with the final keys to his downfall. Behind the towering concrete walls of Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, Diddy's reality has shattered into something he never imagined. Gone are the private jets, the endless staff catering to his every whim, and the power he once wielded without question. In their place is a stark cell, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and the crushing weight of fear, shame, and paranoia. Insiders close to his legal team revealed he spends hours in isolation, pacing his small cell, whispering to himself, and scribbling frantic notes that guards confiscate for monitoring. His attorneys have requested mental health evaluations, citing severe depressive episodes, emotional instability, and unpredictable outbursts. Guards reported that during one routine cell inspection, they found him rocking back and forth on his bunk, mumbling about everyone betraying him and voices never stopping. One former business partner told reporters he's always believed he was invincible. Now he's just another inmate wearing orange. That reality has broken him. Psychologists consulted by the prosecution explained that his entire self-image was built on dominance and fear. Now, stripped of power, he is facing a mental collapse common among high-profile criminals who no longer control their environment. But the most chilling revelation came from a legal aide, present during one of his lawyer meetings, when asked about the upcoming civil suits and potential new criminal charges. Diddy reportedly broke down crying uncontrollably, slamming his fist against the table and shouting, "They're all lying. I'll end it before they take everything." His team immediately requested suicide watch protocols, but officials have not confirmed his current status, citing privacy regulations. What remains clear is that the psychological walls he built to keep himself powerful are now crushing him from within. And with sentencing looming, this breakdown may only deepen. For decades, Diddy's name was synonymous with luxury, success, and untouchable power. But today, his empire stands in ruins, a crumbling monument to arrogance and unchecked dominance. Financial analysts estimate his net worth has plummeted by over 60% since the initial criminal charges were filed. Brands and partners have abandoned him. Endorsement deals are dead. Revolt TV, his media company, is facing board pressure to completely sever ties. Multiple former staff members are filing claims for unpaid wages, emotional abuse, and coercion. Under hostile working conditions, one entertainment lawyer summarized it brutally. He's not just bankrupting financially, his social capital is gone. No one wants to be linked to a sinking ship covered in scandal, but perhaps the most shocking shift is happening among fans themselves. Online forums once filled with praise are now flooded with anger, disgust, and disbelief. Even longtime supporters are questioning if they ever truly knew the man behind the persona, and, La-based music journalist wrote, his music may live on, but his name is forever tainted. It's the end of an era, and a warning to anyone who thinks power protects them forever. As the final civil lawsuits prepare to go to court, experts predict he will spend years entangled in legal battles, draining whatever remains of his fortune. Victims are uniting to force a broader investigation into the entertainment industry's systemic exploitation, with Diddy as the face of its darkest underbelly, and as he sits alone in his cell, awaiting a sentencing date that could lock him away for decades. The world he built has turned to dust around him. His legacy, once polished in gold, now lies shattered, a haunting reminder that no empire is too powerful to fall when its foundation is built on secrets, fear, and control. And that is the shocking downfall of Sean Diddy Combs. From ruling the music world with unstoppable influence to facing decades behind bars, drowning in lawsuits, abandoned by allies, and condemned by the very public that once idolized him. But this isn't just a story about one man's sins. It's a brutal reminder of how far fame and power can hide darkness until the truth explodes for everyone to see. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Diddy will ever recover his empire and reputation, or is this truly the end of his legacy forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this video eye-opening, hit that like button to push it out to more people. Subscribe for daily breakdowns of the music industry's hidden scandals, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. Because trust me, the secrets I have lined up for you tomorrow will be even darker.